Hello and welcome to The Green Stream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Blue Sky. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Well, welcome to the Green Stream. We have a fabulous guest today, Matt Elliott, who is CEO and founder of Blue Lake Ideas. We're going to be talking a lot about that, but and I'm really eager to hear it because it's a brand new venture that Matt is launching, and it sounds really, really interesting. And boy, does he ever have the background to be doing this. He's been a nationally recognized leader in banking, finance, and sustainability. His team has made a major impact. And I hope you're going to talk a little bit about that with us, Matt, about, the impact that you've had in the sustainability field, because it is considerable, billions of dollars of sustainable capital that you've been responsible for mobilizing. But what I love about your bio is you talk about how you have helped your clients, teammates, and organizations grow and thrive in an increasingly chaotic world. And if there's anything that we can agree upon, the chaos is not listening, right? It's still there. And another thing, more than anything, you help people find stillness in the storm and the courage to move forward. So I really look forward to hearing that. But also, just know this gentleman has led, I think, every major civic organization you've chaired. You're co-chairing a major initiative with Michigan State University right now that I hope you'll say a few words about. So you really know a thing or two about leadership and building teams and delivering real impact and results. So welcome. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Terry. It's great to be here. And congratulations on your new news, the impact you've had on people through Inforum. And I can say this as somebody who worked with a lot of great women in my career at Bank of America, nearly all of whom I think were Inforum members or participated in your work. So congratulations and thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Matt. So, but first, can we just kick off? I want to hear more about your ventures, your transitions, and all of those things. But there's got to have been a pivotal moment or experience that shaped your passion about sustainable business practices. What would that be?
Well, when I was at Bank of America, I had the pleasure at one point of having the title of sustainability executive for commercial banking and business banking. But before that, I was what we call an executive sponsor. And so when you're at a senior leader level at a big organization, you usually get a night gig to do. And one of mine was sustainability. I also did diversity, equity, and inclusion for a while. And I got to know and I got to understand a lot more about not only the sustainability, the commitments that the bank had made, but more importantly, how important sustainability was becoming and is to corporate America, not just including the fact that, as a species, frankly, we need to take care of the planet. I've always been endlessly fascinated about how companies and leaders solve the problem. And so to me, this was another set of problems to solve. And when our CEO said at Bank of America, hey, we're going to engage all of our commercial banking clients on the business case for sustainability, because we expect that their supply chains are decarbonizing and we don't want them to be surprised. We actually want to, which still to this day remains the biggest activation on sustainability in the sort of the middle market client base in North America. In the course of doing that and leading our team through that, what was fascinating was to sit with so many companies to figure out how they were solving the problem and how eager they were to learn new ways to do it. And so for me, what it really did was put a finer point and really a framework around this idea that I've always had, which is the power of and. This idea that when we get out of a binary thought process of either or and into yes and, there's an incredible power in that. It brings people together on the one hand, and then the other thing is it creates a tension that forces you to innovate on the other. And that's why sustainability is frankly my favorite and. But I learned it through that case. And so I really got passionate about the experience as I dove deeper into it. And as I transition into my new world of Blue Lake Ideas, sustainability is definitely a part of the puzzle.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit more about that? What are some of the elements? What are some of the key pillars or key elements of the power of and?
Well, the first one is a mindset shift. And I've spent a lot of time and energy understanding, well, what is it that gets us into either or thinking to begin with? And it really starts, Terry, with what you talked about, which is chaos. The world that we live in is increasingly chaotic. And I think as I've shared this with other business leaders, I was at Mackinac recently sharing this with a group of auto executives. The one thing we all agreed on was A, chaos is here, and B, it's our new normal.
Yeah.
It's not going away. The pace of change in the world is accelerating very rapidly. It's accelerating exponentially. And as humans, we weren't built for that. Our nervous systems weren't built for that. So we are almost always in a constant state of trying to simplify and process a stressful world. And what that does is it kicks in your fight or flight response, which forces you to try to look for certainty and look for certainty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What's the easiest thing to do, right? We simplify the world into either or choices. That's fine in a crisis. And frankly, there are a lot of crises in the world that require that kind of thinking. But real innovation, real change, real growth, that requires some deeper thought. And so to me, the first step is to just recognize the fact that we are in either or as a default way of thinking in a lot of ways. And that, by the way, is reinforced by a lot of the institutions and structures in our society, like social media. But put that aside, if we want to collectively solve problems, we have to get into a yes and mindset. And when we do that, now all of a sudden, if you and I are working on a problem together and we're in a yes and land, you don't have to lose for me to win. Okay, the story doesn't have to have a hero and a villain. In fact, if we're going to be sustainable, we're going to have a victory over a long period of time, we both have to win, right? So that's the beginning part. And then the next part is, and I've developed with the help of some folks who have a psychology background and a corporate training background, a framework to help keep you and keep your team in that mode of yes and thinking so that you can work together to solve big problems and more importantly, address and capitalize on big opportunity.
This is just amazing because I feel like it runs counter to what we're trained to do as managers and leaders. We're rewarded for creating clarity, for being decisive, for, really eliminating ambiguity, eliminating risk, certainly eliminating uncertainty. When companies are making decisions about investments and all those things, it's like they have a responsibility to their shareholders, they have a responsibility to their owners, and it's all about eliminating that uncertainty. I'm wondering if you could share maybe an example of how the power of, a more concrete example of how the power of and has played out in a sustainability type of decision.
Sure. Actually, I'll explain how through a series of iterations, sustainability actually turned out to be a cost saver, turned out to be a way to attract and retrain talent, and a way to increase sales. But before I do that, I want to sort of double click on what you were just saying a second ago, Terry, about this idea of certainty. You're absolutely right. I mean, we've all led a lot of big projects. I've led several inside of big organizations. I've seen a lot of leaders and worked with a lot of CEOs and business owners. And at some level, you have to make hard decisions. At some level, you have to choose between alternatives. But the point is how you get there really matters. And I think very often the leaders are rewarded for certainty. And so what happens is you walk into a project or you want to do a change management exercise, you will infect your team with your point of view, frankly. And what happens is that immediately folks coalesce around that point of view rather than keeping the aperture open for a while to understand what the art of the possible is, number one, but then more importantly, bringing enough constituencies to the table through a period of listening, of really deep listening, to understand A, what really is important to them, and then B, what insights they have. If you do that work up front, and then you create what I'll call an experimental mindset in your team saying, hey, I don't know the answer. And this takes a lot of courage as a leader to walk up and say, especially to see your boss, to say, you know what, boss, I don't know, but I'll find out, right? It takes a lot of courage to do that, and you need a lot of psychological safety to make that happen. But assuming you have an environment to make it happen, then you have the opportunity to do some experimentation. As I call it, it's act and adapt. And as you iterate on things, that's when the magic happens. That's when you get to these better outcomes. That's when you're able to balance opposites, for example, as I call it, and land at that place of certainty to say, okay, this is what we're doing, and here's exactly why. And because we've gone through this discipline process, the team's along for the ride. And that's really critical because a lot of times in big organizations, the project team will go away, right? We've seen this, do the work, come out with the outset or come out with the answer, roll it out to crickets, right? Or roll it out and there's all kinds of issues. And this is really hard stuff. So I have a lot of empathy for it. But as I've road tested this framework, and we can talk about it later on executives, what I've seen is that this framework can help people individually, but it also helps teams. And I think that's critical because if we try to just play whack-a-mole and keep up with every bit of news or every email or every whatever, we're going to get caught up in noise and not focus on signal.
I just have to say, Matt, that I'm particularly enjoying hearing someone with your incredible banking background advancing this kind of thinking. Because when I reflect back on my own experience, it's often been the finance people who've been the ones pushing the hardest for either or thinking and kind of that whole black and white certainty, let's be clear. So I'm just so curious about what led you to this sort of revolution. I mean, because that's really what it is, right?
Terry, I don't know that it's a revolution, but it certainly has been an evolution for me personally. I've been a big believer in the power of and. One of the things that my legacy is at Bank of America. I've spent combined 22 of the last 35 years at B of A or its antecedents. And one of the things that the leadership there, led by Brian Moynihan, has always believed in is the work of Jim Collins. And then one of the things that Jim Collins talks a lot about is the genius of and the tyranny of or. And so very often, at the bank, we learned, hey, we are going to do profit and purpose. And in fact, if you're going to be successful over a long period of time, they have to line up. And that's just, part of the ethos of the organization. So when I proposed that as the theme for the Mackinac Policy Conference in 2023, I thought it was a good idea, but I did not think it would have the resonant power that it has. Like I was at Mackinac a few weeks ago, and I still had people coming up to me talking about the theme. And so I think, Terry, that there's a certain permission giving that the word has, that, that theme has, is that, we don't have to all be black or white. We don't have to all be right or wrong. I actually had a friend of mine who had shared this. He's among other things, a psychologist, and he shared this concept with a patient. And as the patient and he kind of walked it through, the patient said, you know what? I realized I was looking at the world in black and white, and now I see it in color. And I thought that was really beautiful, And so if that's something that lands it for people, I couldn't be happier, Let me go back to the story about sustainability, though, in the end, right? So this is another example of iteration, another example of listening for opportunity, not certainty, right? So this is a private company. I can't use their name, but they make tape. which is a very high tech product. It's tape. It's everything you think about: masking tape, duct tape, you know it, you name it. They make tape, and they sell through the major retail channels that we all know and love. You know, the Amazons, the Targets, the WalMarts. And one of them had come to this company and said, "Hey, folks, we have a project to decarbonize our supply chain, which means we're talking to our tape vendors as well, and we'd like you to start, on your sustainability journey. Oh, and by the way, we're going to ask you to track it." So big gulp, like, how do I do this? And so the initial sort of beachhead for sustainability in this company landed with operations. Like, how do we begin to take carbon or other resources out of our manufacturing process? So, sustainability can be thought of, in my view, as the confluence of people, planet, and profit.
Mm-hmm.
And so these folks were working that problem. And so what they realized is that, hey, if we get more efficient at certain things in our manufacturing process, and we use fewer resources like water, you name it. That improves our scorecard, but B, it reduces our cost. So, okay, so now all of a sudden we're finding efficiencies and we're getting credit for those efficiencies, not just in the bottom line, but also with our supplier or our client, excuse me. That's a win. Then they started to describe the fact that they were doing sustainability in the local community where their main manufacturing plant is located, which is in a rural setting. It's very, very difficult for them to find people. By the way, that's the number one issue that business owners always have told me over 35 years, getting the best people and then keeping them. As they started to talk to the employee base and also the local community about being sustainable, their turnover went down and it became easier for them to recruit. Because now, especially younger folks could say, hey, I'm working at a green company, or at least a company that cares. So that's another win. And then they realized, well, wait a minute, we've got now this package of sustainability credentials that we can go market with. And so they took that to a couple of competitors that they had a hard time, or a couple of retailers they had a hard time getting penetration with. And guess what they did? They won. They won relative to much larger competitors because they had a better sustainability story to tell. Now, that took a lot of hard work. That took a lot of, number one, leadership saying, we're going to make this we're going to be profitable and sustainable. Number two, they said, okay, we're going to get realigned around the fact that our scorecard now includes sustainability. We're not going to push back against it, because there were people in the company who are saying, why are we doing this? This is not, And the way that I always articulate that particular objection is, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? Pick one. I hear that from my wife quite a bit. And that's where I learned it, actually. And then the third thing is that their leadership, opened up these windows of experimentation to say, okay, let's go find an answer. You go work on this for a while and don't tell me the answer, just work on it. And then let's see where we get. And they kept iterating on it. And that flywheel has really helped this company turn. And so sustainability now is a pillar of what they do. And I think that, all these issues that we talk about, sustainability, diversity is another one, things like that, they have to fit into your business strategy. And if they do, then they become another value driver for your company. And I've seen it over and over again, especially after talking to 25,000 companies.
Yeah, exactly. Innovation plays a major role in Michigan's economy, and it's probably going to play an even larger role going forward. How does Blue Lake Ideas approach applying innovative thinking? What are some examples of that? You just shared one, but I'm wondering if there are others where you could speak a little bit more about the whole innovation component. Because when I talk to businesses, that's where they start to get worried about cost.
Yeah.
And it can kind of clamp things down, especially if they're in an uncertain environment.
Completely. I was just talking to a group of automotive supplier CEOs at Mackinac about this, about sort of the idea of taming chaos, and the idea of how do you create space for innovation when every day is a crisis, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really difficult. and first of all, I'm never going to say this is easy. This is not easy, but frankly, I used to have a boss that told me one time, Terry, early on, like, Matt, go do the hard deal because there's margin in hard. You'll get paid to do hard stuff. I don't know that my wife agreed with that necessarily because it meant longer hours, but it certainly was interesting work. Um, but I think there's nothing easy. If you choose to take the easy route in business these days, you'll get innovated out of business very quickly. So you have to figure out a way to win today and be relevant and winning tomorrow. So that you always have to do this work. In terms of the work that I'm doing at Blue Lake Ideas, this idea is that I've got some advisory and some leadership experience based on 35 years. And then also I want to give people a tool to help tame the chaos of the world. So part of the three-part process that we just talked about, the first step is pause and reflect and get clear on what your priorities are and what you can control, which is a very short list, by the way. The second one is realign and reframe around this your ors to ands and get clear on what are the things that we're going to have to make an and to be successful, and then commit to that and start to act and adapt, iterate on it. That third step is basically agile development. That's it. That's innovation in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Used by a different name. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing that I'm spending more time on, as you mentioned, I'm doing some work with Michigan State. I'm a Spartan, and I'm a Gen 3 Spartan. Our son's a Gen 4 Spartan. I basically grew up near East Lansing. So to me, MSU's home. And when Kevin Guskowitz, the president of MSU, asked me to co-chair the Green and White Council, it was never a doubt, right? Absolutely. One of the things that we're working on inside of that work is a package of workforce development things that are about preparing students and connecting students to opportunity in the state, but also economic development, which includes innovation, this idea of how do we catalyze innovation and growth by bringing MSU's unique strengths to the table. And the innovation opportunity we have in the state, Terry, is huge. And frankly, we underperform our potential. So we're a top 10 state for corporate R&D. We have one of the strongest research clusters of R1 universities in the country. And yet we still don't have that many successful capital raises or exits at the end of that funnel.
Yep.
Now, I think that's going to change over time because there's a lot of more energy and focus being placed around innovation. My job at Blue Lake Ideas is to help lend a hand. Right now, the lever I'm pulling is at MSU, and we'll see where else it goes from there.
What are some of the most promising or exciting trends in technology that you're seeing? Are there some of those things you can talk about?
Yeah, there are a lot. I mean, some of the things that I'm becoming more familiar with at MSU, Terry. And by the way, I learn something new about MSU, I think, every day. That is really amazing. But the partnership that MSU and Henry Ford have created has already tripled the amount of NIH funding that the combined entity has had.
Wow.
And I just want to take 30 seconds and underscore how critical the government funding for basic research at universities across this country is. Number one, there's a huge return on investment. So if the U.S. government spends or invests $1 today, it will get $2.70 back. That's pretty good ROI. The other thing too is that it forms the basis of incredible innovations in the economy. So 95% of the drugs approved in the last 10 years from the FDA all started as basic research at a university.
Yeah.
The 10 most valuable companies on the planet all stand on the shoulders of technology that was developed starting with basic research at a U.S. university, right? The internet, for example, created by DARPA.
Yep.
but really developed at universities. So it's critical that funding continue, especially in the state of Michigan. What we've seen in Michigan is really great opportunities around health tech and med tech. Of course, mobility. Some of the mobility things that I'm really excited about include things like some of the drone work that's being done at Michigan Central. Using drones and AI, for example, to be able to do energy audits of buildings remotely, which is really cool. Using drones for last mile delivery. We're expanding the ability of the charging infrastructure through over the road charging around Michigan Central. That, by the way, is an Israeli company called Electrion. The only North American installation of their technology is here in Detroit. So those are a few of them. There are a lot of sustainability tech opportunities, especially with all the water that we have here in the state, and also our forests. I mean, mass timber is a way for us to decarbonize the built environment. And I was speaking with Kofi Bonner at Bedrock about this in the last few weeks. He's on our Green and White Council, and he's asking MSU for some research on this. And then I think the last piece, and this is a little bit of newer territory for the state, is we have, number one, a huge defense sector in Detroit in particular, but across the state. And we now have some really unique technology, starting with at MSU at FRIB, to be able to test components for deep space. So the space economy is quite large in the world, but there are only a few places in the world, frankly, that you can test componentry for the kinds of environments you'll see, in orbit, and especially in high Earth orbit. And the only place you can do it is in East Lansing. Yeah. So these are all things happening in Michigan, and I think we're just scratching the surface. As the infrastructure, as the funding, as the ecosystem develops, the flywheel will turn faster, and I think bright days are ahead for innovation.
If you had to say sort of the top things that stand out for you as sustainability solutions that we've managed to get some real traction on in the Metro Detroit market, what would some of those be? I mean, I feel like there's so many things that are at early stage.
Yeah.
Is there anything that's popping its head up?
Detroit neighborhood solar. So Mayor Duggan has this goal of having all of the municipal buildings in the city of Detroit powered by green energy by 2034. Yeah. And so neighborhood solar is now coming online, and so it's a great adaptive reuse of land that's not being currently used. Yeah. It's a way to get green energy into an aging grid. And so we're off and running. The goal the interim goal, right, is to have half of the city's municipal power, coming from green energy in the next few years. So with local neighborhood solar, I think we're off and running to do that. I know there's a lot made of the stops and the starts, or maybe the slower adoption of EVs in the U.S. than maybe was originally forecast, which was a bit of an optimistic projection. But EV market share continues to grow. There's a demand for EVs. And I think, the Charge Ahead program that the city is working on to improve and expand charger access is really critical. I think those things are going to take some shape here. The Joe Louis Greenway is an amazing adaptive reuse of land. And that's going to, be able to reintroduce people to nature. There are a lot of folks in the city who never get a chance to get out of the city. And so it's pretty great to be able to bring nature to the city, right? Not to mention an easy way to get around via bicycle, which is fantastic. You go a lot of places around the country. I have friends from MSU who live in Sweden and spend a lot of time in Copenhagen. They kind of commute. They don't have a car, but they do have a 3-wheel cargo bike. That's just that's the way a lot of other cultures live. We're still a car culture, but on the other hand, we can get around on 2 wheels too. So I'm excited about all these opportunities. A lot of them are early stage, Terry, and it's one of the reasons why, we need to keep talking about the opportunity for sustainability. Hopefully we get supportive policy to help give these kind of nascent technologies a nudge so the market can grab hold of them and accelerate.
Well said. Oh my gosh. Well said. And what a great roundup, Matt. You just gave a really great roundup.
A lot of great stuff to work with.
Yeah, there is a lot of great stuff to work with. Well, one of the things that we like to do with our time together on this podcast is, so many of the ideas we talk about are big, or they're theoretical, or they seem not something that we can touch and implement. Can you help us send our listeners away with some ideas about how they can contribute to sustainable business practices, how they can get it out of the theoretical and into their, a realm that they can act on.
Yeah. Well, the number one stimulus that a lot of middle market companies respond to is what we bankers still refer to as supply chain pressure. Mm-hmm. And what that basically means is I'm going to do what my client tells me to do. All right. So if the client, my son works in automotive, and their client base, his client base, is demanding more and more information about sustainability. Because it's becoming more and more important to the stakeholders around the automotive companies, in particular, the European automotive companies.
I was going to say global markets for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing of it is that sustainability is still a priority for a lot of people here in the U.S. too. Mm-hmm. And so, number one, I think you've got the power of your own consumer choices that can drive that. I think number two is in our discourse to be able to call out, sustainability as an and not an or. I think a lot of people believe and that you have to make a choice between being green or being efficient, or being green and being cheap. Yes. And sometimes in the very near term, that's absolutely true, right? And that's why it takes a while to work through these things. But adopting a yes and mindset and saying, yes, here's where we are today, and we are going to be better in the future. And so it's not an all or nothing. It's not, hey, I'm either you're a climate denier if you have any questions about climate change. That's not true. Like giving grace, giving space for that. And so bringing people through that dialogue and also being able to call out the implicit or, I think, is really critical. And then thirdly, and this is for some of your listeners maybe who are more, focused on how do we catalyze these investments. There's no shortage of opportunities to invest. That's, maybe a smaller segment of folks, but there's still a lot of money that's looking to find a home for sustainable investment, and that's not going to stop. I mean, I think that there's going to continue to be opportunities to invest.
Mm-hmm. I just have to ask, and you may or may not have an answer to this one, but what I hear often, particularly from small business owners, is a real fear about sustainability versus cost. And lots of times, if small business owners can just connect with other examples or some resources to explore that, and to see if there's an and there instead of an or, that can just be so helpful. And, small business owners are also very busy people. They don't have a lot of time in their day to research. Where would you recommend people turn who are looking for those kinds of examples? Is there, for example, a resource that Michigan State has, or, other organizations?
Yeah, there are a lot. So there are several Industry 4.0 accelerators around the city and around the state. And the MSU Research Foundation is one of my favorite things that I've learned about the university in my work, is that it's an incredibly powerful organization. It's affiliated with the university, but it's not part of the university. It actually was funded with the royalties that came off of a cancer drug developed at MSU in the 70s. Which is, and so that formed the basis of the investment fund, and they now manage several investment funds and have hundreds of executives and mentors and residents. So there's lots of opportunities to get some expertise and be connected into these expert networks, Terry, that of folks that really know their way around and can help a small business or help a startup get going in the realm of sustainability. So I think those are two easy areas to look.
Well, Matt, thank you. I think you just gave us a masterclass in this topic, and certainly you've given us inspiration about the power of and, given us all something to think about as we go through our days with the whole universe seeming to force us into or. So, you've really been giving us some great examples of the power of and. So thank you for spending time with us today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Terry. It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the Green Stream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on sbn-detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.